Welcome to the first episode of the Sunday Showdown here on Sky News. I'm your host tonight, Caleb Bond, and joining the showdown this week is Paul Murray, Liz Storer, Evelyn Ray and Joe Hildebrand. Now, we're going to fire up about a lot of different topics tonight and get to the bottom of the big stories of the week. But let's start with last night's incredible results from the Voice referendum. There's plenty to unpack here, but first off, let's get everyone's reaction to the margin. 60.6% to 39.4% nationally, and Yes didn't win in a single state. Albanese was emotional in his concession speech last night.
I have never been as proud to be Australian as when I sat in the red dirt at Uluru with those wonderful women. I have made lifetime friends, and for that I am grateful. Constitutional change may not have happened tonight, but change has happened in our great nation.
Paul, I reckon this margin is finally proof of the outer suburbs and what you might call the quiet Australians, real Australia, you know, having a pop back at the inner city elites where we know it was a heavy yes vote in many cases, and saying, hang on a minute, you're not in charge here.
Yeah, I agree. Look, if I know Albo's a lifelong Souths fan, but can he come over to the West Tigers? Because if he can spend 60-40 as a win, we might need him for the next few seasons. This was total repudiation. Remember where this started, 60-40 the other way, which meant everything from the way that it was prosecuted, the way that it was arrogantly dragged out, the way that it was overly treated by the media, the way that all of it. Every decision and advocacy of it ended up turning people away. And as people started to have a different view, they started to test the idea and it didn't pass, not the pub test, but the practical test. That's why we saw with, say, Jacinta Price or Warren Mundine coming to the fore to say, we're about practical action. And then people would turn around and say, yeah, but a bunch of people talking will lead to... It created this beginning of a divide between what everyone wants and whether this was the right solution. But I just think the perfect metaphor for the people who run the country, the people who fly at the front of the plane, versus not even the people who aren't inside the plane, but the people who are in flyover country, as they say in America, who watch the plane go over, and they saw it and they didn't like it and they pushed it away. But we'll get into it later. But for Albo to turn around and sort of pretend that all of this was worth it, imagine any other Prime Minister who put the country through what he's put the country through and what their reaction would be.
And how's the hypocrisy? Because he keeps getting teary, right? We've seen this throughout the campaign, and now he's teary again, saying, you know, well, we exacted some change, maybe, possibly. Whenever he tries that on, I always just think to myself, if you genuinely believe that this mechanism, the Voice, was going to make real-time change for the quality of life of Indigenous Aussies in our nation, you could have legislated it the minute you became PM last year. But notice, no, he was hell-bent on constitutional change, and that's what lost this vote. That's what got people antsy. If you want to legislate your pet project, go for it. We can ditch it. We can repeal it if it doesn't smash its KPIs and deliver all the wonderful things that you said it was. But now notice, again, he could legislate it, but he said no, he won't, because constitutional change is off the table. So what I want to know is, if this was really about a mechanism that was going to make a difference in the lives of so many, if you were a man of conviction and you believed any of what you've been ramming down our throats this entire campaign, you would legislate it. Why? Because in a line that he's now worn out to death, it's the right thing to do.
Well, it's principle, isn't it? Like, if you believe it,
Exactly.
if you believe in the principle
or is it
of the
practicality?
Voice.
What is it? The truth is, this was a very poorly argued run campaign. I know that. I was part of it. I supported it. I obviously was doing a lot of shouting and jumping up and down on the sidelines and in private. And I won't take out the dead body all tonight on the show. But firstly, this is something that came from Indigenous people themselves. They said, this is what we want, and they wanted constitutional recognition. They wanted it enshrined in the Constitution as part of recognition.
But is that really worth the sacrifice?
Because that would have sent a message to them that the Australian people loved them, valued them, and felt that they were as much a part of Australia as everybody else. That was what they wanted. That was what they said. That is what they said, and that is what they said to me.
We all know that Australians of every colour and creed don't even know what the Constitution is, have certainly never read it.
A few people on the no side clearly haven't read the Constitution because they keep saying, oh, it's going to put race in the Constitution. Race has been in the Constitution since the Constitution existed. It was even put in there in 1967. And the whole point...
I think they're well aware of that.
I don't think they are because people kept saying, this is going to put race in the Constitution.
No, but
it's already there. Oh, it's different. I know it's all different.
No, it is
yeah,
different.
I know, but that's different.
Because the mention of race in the Constitution gives the provision for the federal government to make laws pertaining to any race. Now, the reason that was amended in 67 was it said prior to that, with the exclusion of Aboriginal people, which meant Aboriginal affairs could not be in the purview of the federal government. So the insertion, if you want to call it that, of race in the Constitution simply made an even field for any person of any race in the country. It wasn't about pointing out one particular race.
No. Au contraire, Mr. Bond. It was. It was removed from the Constitution. And again, there seemed to be a lot of constitutional lawyers and experts in recent times that don't actually not actually read the Constitution. It said that it won't be able to make laws with respect to any other race apart from, you guessed it, Indigenous Australians, because they recognised that that was a special case. And yet, when it comes up again 50 years later, everyone's going, oh my God, it's racism, it's racism.
So, Joe, why did it lose?
It lost because it was one of the worst runs, if not the worst run campaign, and not so much even just the campaign.
And nobody disliked the idea. It just was poorly sold.
Absolutely. When the idea was just in people's heads, right? When people said, oh yeah, the voice to Parliament, give advice, yeah, okay. That was when it had 2/3 support. And it is to the campaign's great shame, and I've been the first to be honest about its failings, that it basically pissed half those voters away. And it is a disgrace, and it is appalling how it did it. And it did it in a number of ways. It went from having 2/3 of Australians saying, we've got all this goodwill, we want to do this for you, we want you to be recognised, we want you to have a voice. And then suddenly you had people like who getting up and saying, well, if this doesn't get up, it means that you're all racist and you won't be getting any welcome to countries. And there's about 20% of you I know that are hardcore racists already. And this went on and on. And you
But isn't that, I mean, I think, Evelyn, that's part of the promise we'd never get another welcome to countries, probably why some people did vote no in the end. They were like, get rid of it.
I think everybody's a bit tired of being called names. I think the silent majority has actually finally spoken. And I think that Albo and I think the Yes campaign failed to read the room. I think that the polls that everybody's using, like you've used, they were done before the No campaign even spoke. So all the numbers that majority of people were in agreement with the Voice and all this, I don't think that's actually accurate, because if you look at the more recent polls, it shows after the conversation was had, after not just half the story was had, a greater picture was shown. I think majority of Australians think that perhaps the Indigenous Australians do already have a voice, that there is billions of dollars to make them feel like they have a voice, to help them, to support them. And I think that the problem with the Yes campaign is nobody could answer any questions, and Australians needed clarity, and it was never offered to anybody.
And that is a problem. And again, I've said that, I've written that, and that when the actual debate started, we did not have arguments to counter the arguments of the No campaign.
You still don't, even at the end of the campaign.
It was appalling. I felt like I was a one-man band.
I feel like Aussies still don't understand, because we're an easygoing electorate. Aussies, she'll be right, mate. We're very laid back. We're very easygoing.
We hate change.
We're trying to change our constitution. We go from Bruce Banner to the Hulk within 5 seconds, faster than you can say.
That's right.
A modest.
We've never read it, but we love it. We don't know what's in it, but we want it to stay exactly the same.
Look at our referendum track record. So it is simply the case. This is why I keep coming back to the point. If this is so awesome, if this was a mechanism that was going to work, you should have left our constitution out of it, and then they would have their voice. And we could trial this pet project of Albo's that's supposed to have
the irony is that there were people inside the campaign who wanted to legislate it and not take it to a referendum. And you know why? Because they said Australians were too racist to vote yes. And so it was safer just to legislate it and have the elites do it instead of actually putting it to a vote.
There's the problem.
And then they ran a campaign so poorly and with some of their leading figures saying things like that it became a foregone conclusion. So I don't actually think it was a mistake to put it to the referendum.
Does it not show you how it would have ended, though?
The wrong people were in charge, with the exception of Dean Parkin, who's awesome.
Does it not show you how it would have ended if it had have said yes? I mean, like, the campaign couldn't even figure it out. amongst the hierarchy.
Certainly the people I was talking to within the campaign, in between slamming their heads against a brick wall, had a very clear idea of what it was and how it would work, and also the need for flexibility. So if it didn't work, you didn't have an enshrined model that you couldn't then change without a referendum. But unfortunately, there are a lot of people out there, particularly on the left, who are freestyling, spitballing, just spouting out their fantasies of what they thought it would be, letting the cat out of the bag with what they really thought of Australians. And as soon as that started to happen, it was toxic, and I don't think they realised that they were hurtling off the cliff until
let's just stick on that point for a moment, because as we've been talking about, yes, obviously had a dominant lead at the start of the year, and they squandered a lot of that goodwill on the way to the loss. And one of the central points was that they were never able to articulate how the Voice would help communities. And that was something Warren Dean spoke very passionately about last night.
There's a lot of manipulation.
Are you suggesting the AEC?
You know what? People are committing suicides in these communities. People are being raped and beaten, and this is the questions you come up with? Where's about getting results? Getting people reducing suicide, and instead of this nonsense that people carry on with. It's about time. We had a vote tonight that said Australians want to get things done.